Hey friends, and welcome back to Why I Create. I'm your host David Hay, and this podcast is all about exploring the heart behind the work. What drives people to make things, what keeps them going, and why creativity is so essential in this world. Today, we're doing something a little different. I want to talk about creativity in unexpected places, outside of galleries, outside of studios. Because the more I've thought about it, the more I realize creativity is everywhere. We just don't always have the language to recognize it. So, in this episode, I want to invite you to reframe how you see the world, to start noticing the hidden artists, the city planner, the parent, the therapist, or even the teacher, people who may not be called creatives, but absolutely are. Let's begin with the spaces we move through every day, our neighborhoods, cities, and streets. Think about this. When you walk down a certain block and you feel calm or connected, why is that? It's not random. Someone designed that experience. City planning, architecture, and urban design are incredibly creative fields. Planners and designers shape how we move, how we interact, how we feel. That is creative storytelling, using space instead of words. Take a place like the High Line in New York City. An abandoned, elevated railway turned into a lush public park. That wasn't just a functional fix, it was visionary. Someone saw potential in decay. Someone imagined joy where there was once rust. And beyond the big cities, even small-town design matters, like where the library is placed, how a bus stop is lit at night, whether sidewalks are shaded by trees. These aren't just decisions, they're expressions of values, of culture, of what we believe people deserve. Even street art and murals are part of the story. I've seen whole neighborhoods changed by public art that gives people a sense of ownership, pride, and voice. Creativity in city planning is creativity with real-world impact, physical, emotional, and cultural. So, the next time you're walking somewhere and it feels good to be there, pause and ask, whose creativity made this possible? Now, let's shift from the outer world to the inner one. If you've ever gone to therapy, or even just had a really good, honest conversation, you know how powerful it can be when someone helps you see yourself differently. That's not just empathy, that's creativity. Therapists are some of the most creative people, not because they're painting or writing music, but because they're helping people re-author their own stories. That's storytelling in its most human form. They use tools like metaphor. If you pictured your anxiety as a character, what would it look like? Or let's imagine the version of you who made it through. What would they say to you now? That's poetic and imaginative, and that kind of reframing can literally change lives. There's also art therapy, which invites people to draw or build or write as a way of working through trauma. There's narrative therapy, where someone actually writes their whole story and then rewrites the painful chapters. That's clinical level healing powered by creativity. Even therapists themselves are constantly improvising. They have to read the room, feel what's not being said, and adapt how they speak. That's performance, that's musical, and that's deeply intuitive work. When we talk about creating safe spaces, about emotional transformation, that's the art form. It just happens in quiet rooms, not on public stages. Alright, let's go from the mind to the kitchen. I want you to picture someone who you know makes meals that feels like home. Maybe it's your mom, or a grandparent, a friend who always brings over food when life gets hard. Now, ask yourself, is that not creative? Cooking is one of the most underestimated creative acts in the world. We often box it into domestic work or everyday chores, but the truth is, it's full of improvisation, beauty, and care. Chefs obviously showcase this on a high level, flavors, presentation, technique. But I'm more interested in the creative acts we don't call art. A parent who can turn leftover rice and beans into something fun, or someone inventing meals around food allergies or tight budgets, or even plating something in a way that makes a kid smile after a rough day. Food is emotional storytelling. Every ingredient, every tweak to a recipe, every cultural tradition passed down, it carries meaning. It says something about who we are, where we come from, and what we care about. And then there are moments like gathering around the table, setting candles, playing music, creating a vibe. That's creative. It's performance design, even if no one's naming it that. So whether it's fine dining or a bowl of ramen after a long day, there's a thread of creativity connecting it all. Food reminds us not all art hangs on walls. Some of it sits on plates, gets shared, and disappears, but it still leaves a mark. Finally, let's talk about something I think is criminally overlooked: the creativity of leading people. I'm talking about coaches, teachers, managers, anyone whose work involves inspiring, motivating, and adapting to human beings. Let's start with sports. A coach doesn't just shout from the sidelines. They read the game like a jazz musician reads the room. They tweak plays on the fly and feel the energy of the team. They find ways to help each player shine while keeping the group in sync. That's like composition or even a live performance. That's creative thinking under pressure. Now, think about teachers, especially in under-resourced classrooms. They turn dull material into dynamic lessons and invent games, analogies, skits, whatever it takes to get through to that one kid who's shutting down. And it's often happening with very little support and even less recognition. And in the business world, good managers build cultures. They solve conflicts like puzzle makers. They experiment with workflows, team dynamics, storytelling during meetings, like a kind of invisible theater. And in all of these roles, there's a need to be present, to be responsive, and even flexible. That's the essence of creativity, being alive in the moment and shaping what happens next. So the next time someone says they're just a coach or just a teacher, remember they're artists of human potential. Okay, so let's zoom out. What is creativity, really? It's not just what we produce, it's how we see. It's how we solve, care, and make space for others to thrive. And when we start noticing creativity in these unexpected places, when we start honoring the hidden artists around us, it changes how we move through the world. It deepens our appreciation, and it invites us to participate. You don't need a microphone or a canvas to be creative. You might already be living creatively, and just not calling it that. So here's my invitation for you this week. Notice one act of creativity in a place you wouldn't expect. It could be a bus driver who's always cheerful, a friend who tells stories in the group chat like a screenwriter, or the way your neighbor decorated their porch. And if something stands out, share it with me. Message me, tag me on socials, or even just comment underneath this episode. I'd actually love to feature some listener reflections in a future bonus episode. But until then, keep noticing, keep honoring, and most of all, keep creating. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I know it is a lot different from what I usually post every week, but there's a reason for that. I'm building out a second season, and I have some very interesting and unique interviews coming up. I'm expanding the scope of this podcast to include many different types of artists, not only musicians. There's also going to be some bonus content that I'm very excited for you guys to hear. Make sure to go follow the TikTok and Instagram at whyicreatepodcast. Also something very interesting, I am releasing an EP on July 4th with music from an upcoming episode. Everything is originally written by me, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear that. I will be mentioning it, and I'll be tagging it in the episode description once it comes out. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. I really hope that something from this episode spoke to you, and I will be talking to you again next week. If you have any ideas that you would like to see from me for an episode, you can shoot me a direct message on my socials or even add a comment underneath this episode. Until next time, I am David Hay, and this is the Why I Create podcast.